Greetings from the set of Metro and More at Metropolitan Community College, serving more than 50,000 students with over 120 programs at our 8 locations in the daytime, evening, weekends, or online. I'm your host, Kent Pavelka. Welcome again to Metro and More. More of what you need to know about Metropolitan Community College. Always a pleasure once a quarter to visit with David Brown, the President and CEO of the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce, for our quarterly Chamber of Commerce update. Always a pleasure, as I said. First quarter in the books. What kind of start in general was the first quarter for 2014?
You know, first quarter is always a time of anticipation anyway, because you've finished out the prior year and you're geared up for the next year. For us, this year was also the beginning of the implementation of that new Prosper Omaha strategy. You know, we've talked about it numerous times on the show that we've spent a year putting the strategy together. And so it's been fun to kind of see all these new initiatives kind of kick off and start seeing people doing things rather than just talking about them. So we've had a lot of fun doing that. We've been real busy, that also means, kind of getting that kind of work done. Economic development's been very strong. The legislature was, as always, complex and complicated. We got a lot of things done this year. Didn't get some things done that we'd like to, but we're making plans for the future. So first quarter's been kind of as expected, really busy, but I think productive.
As you intimated, there's always a lot of collective balls in the air when it comes to chamber work. Is there a collective focus, though, at a given time that is kind of a moving target that just kind of develops maybe unpredictably so? And if so, what was that in the first quarter? You know,
I think for us this year, it was all making sure that we were all on the same song sheet of this new strategy. Because as we've talked before, you know, in the past, this economic development strategy primarily focused just on the things that the Economic Development Division did. Everybody else was supportive of it, but they kind of had their own functions to do. We developed this new strategy. It was a chamber-wide strategy that touches all 3 divisions plus my area as well. And so the entire organization now is kind of focused on how do we implement and achieve the outcomes that we promised we would for Prosper Omaha. So in a normal process, the economic development team might be busy with the new stuff and everybody else would kind of be carrying their load the way they normally did. This year, everybody was hands on deck trying to figure out the new program, the new staff arrangements, the new management pieces. I mean, there was a wholesale change. Everybody's cheese got moved in the organization. And so this year, it was, we had to be really focused on what we were going to do that first quarter, because that was going to really be part of the domino of what we get done by the end of 5 years. We had to do it right this first quarter. So everybody was really focused on that thing this year.
When you talk about cheese being moved, that can be a stressful environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people like it and some people don't.
How'd that go? I mean, was it a significant cheese move?
It really was. Everybody in the organization in the last year has ended up with a different leader. So we went from 5 divisions to 3. All of the departments were reshuffled under those new leaders in a different way. And so for the last year, everybody has had to get used to a new kind of vice president and their style. We've had to learn about a new way of sharing responsibilities and common measurement of goals and accomplishments, which meant some people have new accomplishments they've never been measured on before. So some people took it real easily, right in stride, and were really excited about it. It took some folks a few months to kind of get their arms around it. But in the end, it all related back to our common mission, which is building investment and job opportunities in this community. And so as long as everybody kept their eye on that prize, the cheese moving went okay.
You're talking about a sea change in the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce internally.
Yes.
And you mentioned 5 divisions to 3. A lot of people don't have a clue about what the chamber does. Explain what it was and what it is.
Well, we used to have a division that was focused on a relatively narrow part of our agenda. So we used to have a membership division and a communications division and a finance division and an economic development division and a public policy division and a workforce development division. And then there was administration, which is me and everybody else that kind of didn't fall in one of those other areas. And when you do that, you create silos. You know, you have vice presidents who are responsible for each of those divisions, and they're most concerned about the people that they manage every day and accomplishing their outcomes as it is additive to the overall chamber outcome. What we found, though, was that also caused competition for funds. It created a large overhead at the top end that meant that we probably didn't have enough resources to do things at the middle and lower end. We didn't have enough Indians, we had an awful lot of chiefs. And so we put this process together to say, maybe we need to really fundamentally change not only the silo problem that we have, but even the kind of leader that we have. So instead of having purely a subject matter expert at the head of each of those divisions, I really needed leaders of people at the heads of those divisions. And then below them is where all the subject matter expertise comes in. I say below only because that's how org charts are had,
Sure.
but essentially a cadre of people who are led by really good people leaders, who are strategic in nature, who understand the big picture, who want to accomplish goals within their own area, but actually across the organization. So we said, okay, I'm going to eventually, and it only took us about 6 or 7 months to get it done. We had some people retire and some people move, and so we said, all right, now's the opportunity to get this done. So we have now 3 really significant senior vice presidents who are first and foremost leaders of their people. They know their strengths, they know their weaknesses, they understand how to motivate people, they know how to measure people, they know how to sure manage the process, but mostly they're leaders. And they all had responsibilities for accomplishing things in their areas too. So our community reinvestment and public policy senior vice president is our chief lobbyist. And so she's also our chief player in education and workforce. So she has significant roles to play, but she has people there that also provide support mechanisms and leadership in getting those agendas done. The vice president for innovation and research is kind of our internal agency person. So any services that are provided to our people inside, so communications, membership, marketing, all those kind of things, she manages all of that process and the people that do it. And so she's kind of an agency delivery system. And then the economic development senior vice president, who we talked about in the past, who we just hired at the end of last year, actually at the very beginning of this year. He started about 45 days ago, and he's been a terrific find. He oversees everything economic development, but Prosper Omaha, as you know, also has some connectors to community development, to workforce development, to business climate, to site development. And so he's having to work across all the other divisions to accomplish his agenda too.
Talking about Randy?
Randy Thalen, yeah, our new senior vice president. So between Randy and Ann and Wendy and myself, we've split up all the teams into appropriate areas, and now we're leading and managing those teams. So again, we've gone from, I think, 5 or 6 vice presidents and myself now to 3 senior vice presidents and me.
Well, I'm just curious, was this a vision you'd been kind of mulling for a while? I mean, what precipitated it? And I mean, are you expecting different results?
Yeah, we actually expect better results, even though our results have been pretty phenomenal. The real impetus for this was a recognition about maybe 3 years ago now that we were going to have a significant amount of turnover due to retirements. I looked at our staff list and realized that we had more than a dozen people that were going to be retiring in the next 5 to 7 years. And when I looked at who those people were, several of them were vice presidents, but several of them were key members of our staff who had been here a long, long time. They had a lot of institutional memory, and we were going to lose that institutional memory when they left. And we hadn't done any real cross-training at all to get people knowledgeable about their contacts and their agendas and all those kind of things. So that was one issue. The second is that the chamber has notoriously been, we want to budget every single penny we take in to get its maximum return. And what that meant was whenever an opportunity presented itself that we hadn't planned for, whether it was a good opportunity or a bad one, we had to go out and either raise money or significantly cut a budget somewhere else in order to get something done. I wanted to free up some money so we had some flexibility. And it was clear that one of the reasons that we couldn't do that was we had our highest paid people at the top, we just had too many of them. And if we could figure out a way to structure both I'll call it a succession plan and an operating plan that would have fewer people at the top and the ability to hire more people kind of at the working stage and free up some dollars for resources for unexpected opportunities, that we would be a stronger organization long term. So we sat down actually with Gallup and said, how do we do this? You know, they have people on their team that are real expert in helping corporations think through organizational change. And they told us something really interesting. They said, you know, you're asking some of the right questions, but you haven't asked the critical question first.
Which was?
And I said, what's that? And they said, well, the critical question is, what do you want the organization to accomplish over the next 10 years? And then you build a structure around what those accomplishments need to be. So you don't go in and say, I've got these boxes to fill. How do I fill them most effectively? First, you got to figure out if those are the boxes that you need or not. You know, the old good to great stuff that you get put the right people on the bus, and then you put those people in the right spots. Well, I wasn't even at the bus stage yet. I couldn't even figure out what the bus is. I mean, we haven't defined yet where the bus was going.
Mm-hmm.
And so we spent about a year working on that whole process of, is our vision still appropriate? Is our mission still appropriate? Are our values still consistent with what we want to get done? And then we went through the Prosper Omaha strategy process to kind of tell us, where is this bus going to go? Once we got that accomplished, the structure itself was a little easier to do. We could then figure out what I needed to have in terms of leadership. I knew the people that were leaving, and so we just decided, instead of waiting for those retirements to happen, we just went ahead and made the change up front and figured out how to move some folks into consulting and then ease them into retirement, or accept their retirement and then move on with a different structure. And so far, it's worked really well. I'm really proud of the team, having said we were a totally different organization than we were a couple of years ago. Some of the same faces, but we're operating differently. We're operating, I think, more efficiently. We communicate so much better. Our leadership is they're really just terrific people who really like their people, understand their people, aren't afraid of hiring people that are smarter than themselves, inspire people to do great things, and have excellence and passion and vision and about everything that they do. We have a family value in the organization. That's one of our top 4 values. Family, passion, vision, and excellence are the 4 values we live within. And that family value has helped us create a culture that attracts people, even though we're not the highest paying organization in the community. And we can't compete with some of the larger companies when it comes to salary and benefits. But I can create a culture that will attract people. We are an engaged workforce. I mean, we know about each other, we worry about each other. We are very, very flexible. I expect you to go, if you have to go to the doctor with your kid, you need to go to the doctor with your kid. And I'm not going to dock your pay when you do that, just go. If you need to go see your kid's soccer game, I expect you to go see your kid's soccer game. I don't expect you to work weekends. If you can help it, don't. Now, if you got a big project coming up, everybody does, but
Yep.
you know, we're not a 7-day-a-week organization. I mean, I might be. My phone's always available for phone calls and all that kind of good stuff. But you know, that's why they pay me the bucks they pay me. I'm supposed to be accessible to our members whenever. But I expect our people to work as hard as they possibly can for us, but realizing that working for us isn't the end all be all. The reason they do it for us is because they have families they want to support and they want to have a quality of life. So we've created a structure where people can live a really good life, work at a really good job in a really good environment, and that those two aren't in conflict with each other. And that has helped us keep people and helped us attract people. So if you do that with a really powerful mission where people believe in your mission and they believe that they're contributing and that their opinions count and that they're a major part of the organization, you can be really successful in just about any business. And we've been fortunate that we've been able to craft that kind of a culture and have a staff that really believes in what we're doing and a group of volunteers that really believe in what we're doing.
So the question by Gallup, you know, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to be? Kind of, in a way, was defined by the vision of Prosper Omaha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the organization has always been about job creation and protecting business in some way or another, but we've grown that agenda over the years to be reflective of creating a quality community. And that broadens what you do in a pretty significant way, because now all of a sudden we know that education and workforce drive business development. Those two things are part of a quality community, so we should be worried about that. Neighborhoods drive a quality community, so we've been involved in community development for a long time. And so there's a lot of our agenda now actually is a result of Dick Bell's comment way back in 2004 when he was our chairman and said, you know, the chamber is now going to be engaged in making sure that all of Omaha is able to grow and that all citizens can prosper here, not just West Omaha or downtown. And that has driven change in our organization for 10 years now. Prosper Omaha is the next logical extension of that we've taken our economic development strategy and put in its title prosperity. Prosper Omaha means we're going to be looking at it every single day knowing that we want to increase the prosperity, the opportunity for prosperity for all citizens here.
So, taking a step back, Prosper Omaha is a 5-year
Yes.
campaign, for lack of a better term,
Yep.
2014 through 2018.
Yes.
Initiated the first of this year.
Yes.
Explain it.
Yeah, Prosper Omaha is the name of both the strategy itself and the campaign for funding it. The Chamber has typically funded economic development for the past 20 years now with 5-year campaigns. And most of the money, with the exception of about $125,000 a year that comes from the city of Omaha, all the rest of the money that we've raised over the past 20 years has come from the private sector. So the first 5 years, it was $5 million we raised over 5 years. The second was 7.5 years over 5 years. And then we raised $20 million over 5 years. It's a big jump, and we really grew what our activities were.
Which was called what?
Which
at
was
the
called the
time?
GO campaign.
The GO
at the time,
campaign,
right.
sure.
So
this,
the first 10 years was Target Omaha. The
Right.
second 10 years was the GO campaign.
And now Prosper Omaha.
And now Prosper Omaha. And so Prosper Omaha has, as I mentioned, an expanded agenda just from economic development. So it has 4 main components to it. Regional economic development, which means that we do economic development in Cass County, Sarpy County, Douglas County, Washington County, and Dodge County, and then recently we added Pottawatomie County as well to the mix. And within that regional economic development, we have programs that focus on entrepreneurship, small business assistance, retention, expansion of existing business, and recruiting new business. So those are kind of basic blocking and tackling
Sure.
kind of economic development. There's goals that we've set for each one of those that will result in about $3 billion in capital investment over the next 5 years, 12,000 high-paying jobs, about 150 new companies to the market, 150 expanded companies to the market, 100 new startups, and 1,000 small businesses assisted.
Those are the goals.
Those are the goals of that program for the next 5 years. The second big part of it is branding, where we are expected to market this community for new investment primarily. And we've expanded that new investment marketing to include recruitment of individuals here, and then working with the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Sports Commission, attraction of tourism and conventions, as well as more sporting events. So we're in the middle right now of going through a branding process. You actually were part of a meeting this week where we're trying to build a brand for the region. What's the narrative? What's the story we want people to know about this region? So that's the second big piece. The third piece, we call it business climate, but it's really about placemaking. It's a recognition that we need to shore up some things in the community if we're going to continue to be successful. And in that area, there's again 4 primary goals. Site development, we're going to build 5 new industrial parks over the next 5 years. We're going to work with the city to build a land bank and a community development finance institution that'll help finance housing in East Omaha. We're going to create a candidate academy that'll help educate people about how to run for public office and then teach them how to be good elected officials once they get in public office. And then there's some research that we need to enhance that enables us to carry out some of our public policy agenda and economic development agenda. So that's the business climate agenda. And then finally, there's a talent development and recruitment agenda. And this is just a reflection of the fact that we've got low unemployment. We've got a number of companies that can't find the skilled people that they need, and that's been a problem here for several years. And it's time for us to match up the needs that companies have with the pipeline of people coming into the workforce. So we spent the last year building a human capital strategy to kind of identify what it is that we're trying to get, what we need to develop in the workforce. And right now we're working with the providers of people, if you will, the K-12 system, the community college system, the 4-year degree system, trade unions. How are they providing people into this pipeline so we can make sure we've got the skill sets that we need of people coming into the workforce? So that's what Prosper Omaha is. So you can see it crosses a lot of barriers. It's economic development, it's community development, it's workforce development, it's education, it's quality of life. And so Prosper is a $23 million campaign.
Which is what, 3 more than what
3
GO
more,
was?
Yeah, GO was $20 million each year. And actually the last GO campaign in 2008 through 13, we ended up raising $18.7 million. Remember there was this national recession that kind of came in the middle of that. So this is a pretty significant bump from 18.7 to 23 million. The good news is last week we announced that we had actually surpassed the $20 million mark in commitments, and we're well on our way to hitting the 23 million mark. So if all goes well, by early this summer, we'll hit 23 million and hopefully pass that. And that'll give us the resources to do a lot of things that a lot of other communities are not able to do. Let us be really, really aggressive in becoming our own best lead generator for new companies coming to town, really be effective in talent recruitment. Because when it comes down to it, and talent in particular, Kent, we've talked about this before, population growth in this community has essentially three primary sources. Births,
Yep.
or a net against that, deaths, or people moving here. And people moving here, there's a whole bunch of different sources that can happen. Well, in 2009, 10, 11, we actually had a net in-migration into the community. Those are the years that we had jobs and other communities didn't. So people that were here stayed here, and people that wanted to get a job moved here from outside. In 12 and 13, we saw those numbers reverse, primarily because people who were living here started looking at jobs in other places and went to other places to work, and not as many people moved here. And so we actually had a net out-migration of people in 12 and 13. We need to turn that around because we need to grow the population if we're going to be able to grow the economy here. So for my own personal goals that we've set for Prosper Omaha, I think we ought to be shooting to double the growth of the double the growth rate of GDP in this region over the next decade, and double the population growth rate over the next decade. So we're at about 1.5%, 1.6% a year on average for each of those, and we should be looking at 3 and 4% growth in population and GDP over the next decade. If we do that, I think you're going to see Omaha really take that next step from a really successful community to one that's just poised for greatness out there. So that's what Prosper Omaha is all about.
Yeah. You had mentioned the figure 23 million, and then you said per year.
No, 23
it's
million.
for the 5 years.
Through the 5 years,
Yeah.
And it's
But so the 18, whatever it was the
for a
5-year figure
five-year
for
figure,
Omaha.
right.
Yeah.
You know, the other interesting thing about Prosper Omaha is I mentioned the industrial parks and I mentioned the land bank and I mentioned some entrepreneurship. In order to accomplish those three activities, we're also going to be raising dollars outside of Prosper Omaha to accomplish those. So the industrial parks will be about $40 million in addition to the $23 million. The land bank will be about another $10 million probably in addition to the $23 million.
Private sector?
Well, there'll be a combination. There'll be a combination of public and private and philanthropy, so the 3 Ps. The first industrial park in North Omaha, we raised the $8 million for that, and that's a combination of private money, public money, and debt financing from financial institutions. So, you know, it's going to be a really interesting combination how we pull all that off. But if you put those together, you know, the 40 million and 10 million, that's another 50 million bucks plus the 23 million gets you to 73 million. I mean, we're spending a lot of money. And then we're probably going to have to find another $100 million for venture capital to support the 100 new companies that we want to engage in getting started up here too. So there's a lot of money that we're pulling into this from our partners and from other assets to make this Prosper Omaha strategy work.
Yeah. Is that the total budget look at the Chamber of Business? Because you've got...
No, the economic development is about half, a little more than half of our budget. We also have about $2 million in dues that come in every year for kind of traditional chamber membership stuff, which don't forget, we are a chamber organization first that also happens to have economic development as its agenda. So we put on about 150 events a year. All of those are sponsored and or tickets are purchased for a lot of those, the larger events in particular. We do educational seminars. We have a website that has all kinds of services on it for our members. And so we're doing things like Leadership Omaha, Omaha Executive Institute, Young Professionals Council. All of those things are kind of under the traditional chamber umbrella in addition to the work we're doing under the rest of the Chamber for Economic Development. So we're 54 staff, about an $8 million budget. So we're moving up in the world in terms of resources that are available to us.
Maybe we can spend a few minutes on each one of these topics that you mentioned under the Prosper Omaha. The goal of increasing business, jobs, and investment. 20 new projects.
Yeah, really good first quarter already. We've had 20 commitments already this quarter. That's about $148 million worth of capital investments and about 1,800 jobs. So really good way to start the year. The goal for the year is 60 companies, and $600 million in capital investment. So we're on path to hit those numbers.
Talking about For one thing, the Madonna Rehabilitation Hospital.
Yeah, just to give you some examples, Madonna was one. We worked with that company. You know, we've been working with them for quite a few years. They were actually trying to figure out, first, is there a market for what we're trying to do up here? And those are some of their own internal research. And then, you know, what impact they would have on the medical marketplace
Right.
if they did come in here. And so we were helping them with the site selection issues and the real estate stuff that we typically would help companies with.
It's going to be on West Dodge, right?
Yeah, West Dodge. It's $93 million rehab hospital, which has already developed partnerships with most of the other hospitals here in town. They do primarily severe brain trauma rehabilitation, and they do a marvelous job at it. So, you know, that was one of the projects that we had. The Tyson Foods announcement in Council Bluffs was another project that we were involved in. And I think we also had a startup that we helped us, some small business assistance stuff that we're going to start listing, because in the past we would help these small businesses and not kind of indicate that they were a success, but we were spending lots and lots of hours with some small businesses every year trying to help them grow their businesses, but we just weren't counting it. Well, I'm becoming more and more convinced if you don't measure it, you don't mean it, and so we're going to get more and more engaged in measuring all those companies that we help.
I had a note here about the Omaha culinary tours.
Yeah, it's a small business that just wanted to try and grow a little bit. We had to help them find some real estate and help them find some financing, and so our small business staff kind of spent some time and energy with them to help them get what they needed to get done.
The entrepreneurship and innovation piece, the startup station. What is a startup station?
Yeah, this is really cool. You know, we've been trying to figure out for now more than that, probably 8 years now, what role chambers of commerce can play in entrepreneurship. You know, if you go to a traditional entrepreneur, if there is such a thing, it's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? Traditional entrepreneur.
Yes, it is.
It is. You go to a guy who says, I'm an entrepreneur, and you say, come and join the chamber. They'll say, yeah, I don't. That's for
Grandpa.
Other people than me. That's not me. And yet, when you talk to, when you do the research and try and find out what the entrepreneurial ecosystem includes, a lot of it is the kind of stuff that we do. So networking is a really good example. So our kind of networking with the chamber is existing businesses rubbing elbows with each other and creating an opportunity for people to sell more goods and services. And we do that all the time. And our members tell us every year that's the #1 thing they want us to do for them. Put me in front of potential customers. And so we do that all the time. You talk to entrepreneurs and they want networking too. They don't want to call it that, #1, because what they really want is to be able to rub elbows with inventors or with attorneys who are really good in patent law or with venture capitalists or angel investors. You know? So they actually want to also meet with other people who are entrepreneurial so they can kind of commiserate about the challenges and maybe learn from each other. So it's a different kind of networking, but we had to figure out a way to kind of create space where we could help them do that. So our first effort was really sort of, how do we just create opportunities for entrepreneurs to do their thing? As we've gotten into it more and more, we've realized that there's other things that we can do that are pretty tangible. So we can support major entrepreneurial initiatives that are here in town. So Big Omaha, which is happening next week. That's a major Midwestern entrepreneurial conference that's here in Omaha. It's got a great reputation, so we're sponsoring that activity. We're sponsoring Straight Shot, which is an entrepreneurial accelerator here in the community, which last year brought 7 companies into town, and 5 of them stayed here and are operating their businesses here. And they're doing another round again this year. We relocated our entrepreneurship director and his small staff to the Mastercraft building, which is in North Omaha, just north of the Hot Shops development. And it's a real estate building, a building that was developed by Bob Grinnell as a real estate play that's turned into a kind of a for-profit incubator. There's 35 plus startups in this building, and it's a really cool, funky place where startups can go and learn from each other and kind of grow with each other. Well, we realized that maybe there was another kind of space that needed to happen, and this was for those folks that maybe they're in their garage or their basement right now, or worse, their mom's garage or basement, you know, and mom wants her garage back, and they're probably at the stage where they can go somewhere and run a business, but they really can't afford maybe a market rent. So where do we put these kind of people? We don't really have that kind of an incubator here in town. So Dusty Reynolds, who is our entrepreneurship director, started thinking about something innovative and found some places where they've actually converted shipping containers into offices.
Really?
Yep. And so we went to the company that we thought probably had the most shipping containers on the planet, and that's Union Pacific, and said, can you work with us on kind of developing a container village that we will convert into startup office spaces for new startups? So we went to Bob Grinnell at Mastercraft, and he had some warehouse space that he wasn't using in the Mastercraft complex. And so now, in partnership with UP and several other companies, we are creating a thing called the Startup Station, up being UP, and station, of course, being a reflection of the railroad industry.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll be about 20 spaces in there that'll be shipping containers that'll all be outfitted as offices with the 1 gig service from CenturyLink and all the power and all the kind of needs that they're going to have. And there'll be places that startups can rent for, I think, up to a year and a half at very, very, very reasonable rates, which they can then graduate into more traditional space once they have had that chance to kind of get their businesses up and running. So we're in the middle of putting all that together right now. We haven't had the official announcement of it yet because it's still kind of in the kind of the growth phase. But we've sent a lot of information out to potential investors to kind of name one of the containers, brand one of the containers, and provide some investment there. So we're very excited about this. It's going to be a really innovative space,
You bet.
and it'll be something that can we can put our stamp on to say, see, we actually can provide some relevant services in this entrepreneurial space.
Might bring some people from outside the market in.
Yeah, well, what we hope to happen, I don't know if you know much about the Straight Shot Accelerator, but the idea is
No,
to
I don't.
identify a bunch of companies that are startups from outside the community. They had this year, I'm guessing, they probably had 40 companies send them business plans and say we're from outside the community for the most part, although there's some Omaha and Lincoln companies expanding in it too, saying that we're ready to get our company off the ground, but we need to be in this accelerator, an environment where other startups like themselves will be mentored by existing entrepreneurs and business people for up to 120 days. And at the end of it all, they have really developed their product or their concept so much that they actually have a demonstration day in front of investors. And then those investors can choose to invest in these companies or not.
Is Mark Cuban in the panel, or?
No, Mark, no, but Mark Haysbrook, our own Mark Cuban at Dundee Venture Capital, is kind of behind all of this.
Yeah.
They did it last year. They did it with 7 companies, and I think 4 or 5 of the 7 companies ended up coming from the outside, and most of them stayed here. But part of the problem is that they're located in one space during this whole thing together. Once they graduate, they don't have any place to go. And so they've got to find out some place they can afford to go. So potentially our startup station could be the next transition phase for them. Okay, we've come here, we've built our business plan, we've pitched it, we've got our first stage of funding. Now let's go into this startup station and get our first year or so under our belt, prove that we're viable, and then move into something that might be a next stage, maybe at the Mastercraft or some other place here in town. Because in the end, we got to have more than one space for entrepreneurs here in the community. It can't just all be in one place. If you live out west, Kent, and you really like the environment out west, and the only place you can start up a business might be in the Mastercraft building, that'd be okay for some people, but some folks might say, you know what, we need to have some kind of creative space out west too. So we're now starting to look at how do we replicate other kinds of spaces in places around the community.
Do you want to talk any more detail? I mean, we touched on these things, but part of this, the focus here is on the building of the brand and image, and that's when do you think that is going to end up with a final product?
We're hoping to roll that out in August, although we'll probably starting to communicate concepts in the June timeframe. We want to roll it all out to say this is a completed message. It's got a completed narrative. It's got completed graphics. It's got a graphics book that goes along with it. And in the end, it's really simple. It's what Metro does by having this banner behind you, and by the words that you use to introduce the show and close the show every time. You put your words in people's minds about who you are. And Omaha has not done a real good job of that. We have put millions of words in hundreds of millions of people's minds, but nothing has stuck to a point where it's that iconic statement that says this is what Omaha is. In some places, those icons are physical. The Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, the Empire State Building in New York, the Bean in Chicago. You start putting these different things in front of people. People say, yep, that's what I think of Chicago, or whatever it might be. We don't have any of those. Warren Buffett comes probably the closest that we have as an icon. But some people don't even believe he lives here. You know, they know he's from here, but you know that's not enough for most people to recognize us. And so while we are glad to use that icon, and Mr. Buffett's been very willing to let us do that and use him in that way and his image in that way, we need to come up with something that is holistic, that is a narrative really that says who we are and what it is that we are that most people don't understand that we are. So I point people to the pure Michigan advertising that they might see now on TV, or the state of New York is doing some of that work right now, calling themselves the Other New York. There's a lot of different places. Colorado has just gone through a statewide branding process. The state of Nebraska is doing through a tourism branding process. So this is not an unusual process. How we've done it's unusual. We've, instead of just hiring an agency and having them do all the research and come back to us with a few ideas and then selecting one and having them flesh everything out.
Very collaborative effort.
Yeah, we've done a real collaborative effort where we've got 6 different committees and a collection of 16 different creative directors from ad agencies who are working together to come up with a collection of ideas for what the brand should be. And once they finish their work, we'll then flesh all that out and then ultimately decide upon a single notion. And then that notion will be beefed up and all the materials put to it and the graphics put to it. And then we'll build a multi-year campaign around that brand. And we'll use it, we'll spend about $6 million over the next 5 years pushing that brand. The Convention Bureau has agreed with this process too, so they'll use their resources to push the brand for tourism and convention activity. And the Sports Commission will use it to try and attract even more sporting events here. So we're hopeful that all those organizations using the brand will double and triple the amount of exposure it has out there. So when we ask someone, what do you know about Omaha? They will be able to parrot back to us what we've told them. Today, when you tell somebody you're from Omaha, they go, Omaha? Why do I know that name, or why in the world do you live there?
Mm-hmm.
And I think our response should be, I'm from Omaha. Oh, I've heard about you. You guys are the place that has this and this and this, and it'd be a great place to visit, and we really ought to consider having a business there.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it really is.
And I love the
fun.
process. I was fortunate enough to be involved in a little bit of it, and I think I like the way you're attacking it.
We're having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
I must admit, it is far more complicated herding cats like this than we needed to go through. But I'll take that back. We needed to go through this process because it's not just the chamber brand; it's the community brand, and we want the community to be able to embrace this as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun, kind of trying this out over the next several months.
What about the always ongoing goals of improving competitiveness and improving the business climate? What's the initiative within this 5-year period in that respect?
Well, Prosper Omaha did identify the fact that we're supposed to improve the business climate here, and we've had that on our agenda for a long time as part of our public policy agenda. This year's legislature was both successful and frustrating in that regard. I mean, you know that we went out there with a very aggressive tax reform package that was focused on reducing income taxes and in some cases property taxes to get us to be much more competitive within the Midwest and across the country.
Spending some of the surplus.
Yeah, the surplus is $1 billion or so when you add it all up from the rainy day fund and the surplus, et cetera. And we felt that this was a good year to get that done. We had a governor who was supportive of it. We had a legislature that just spent the whole summer hearing about the need for tax reform in the state. The legislature came back instead and said, we're going to spend time on property tax reform, but we're not going to do the work on income tax reform this year. And they ended up spending dollars, putting more money back into the budget for spend rather than taking those dollars out and using it to cut taxes. Now we did get some. We got income taxes were indexed against inflation for the first time, which is not insignificant. In a normal year, we'd probably say that was a pretty significant gain. We got the Nebraska Advantage Act extended for a few more years, which was important because that's the major incentive package in the state. We got some movement on military retirement pensions not being excluded from income tax. Mm-hmm. It's a very narrow margin, though, a very small part of military pensions, and so it didn't cover everybody. But in a normal year, we'd say, yay, we had a good year. But we had really high expectations for getting something significant on income taxes this year. And so we've kind of gone back to the drawing board to see, okay, what is it about our process that wasn't effective? How can we be a little bit more prescient with our crystal ball to kind of figure out what's doable in each legislative session. You know that we have a PAC in-house, and so we're right now focusing attention on which races that we can support candidates in. It was a good year. It was not a great year. It was a learning year for us. And we like to think that we learn every year, but there are some lessons that are more difficult to learn than others. Some lack of progress that's more difficult to stomach than others. And this was one of those years we kind of all stood back until we wish we had gotten more done. But we can be pleased with what we got, but not satisfied. Mm-hmm. And so now we're about the business of trying to figure out what's going to happen next.
Expectation was more because there was the rainy day fund money, or
well, there were really three reasons for it. One, the prior year, you may recall, was a huge proposal by the governor to significantly reduce taxes in the state to a level that even we found that it was going to be negative for business. I mean, that sounds weird that you can cut taxes and businesses won't benefit from it. But the only way we could get down to the level the governor talked about then was also to increase the cost of some businesses by eliminating some exemptions that would have made us the only state in the union that didn't have those exemptions, particularly for manufacturing and for transportation companies. Well, it made no sense to be really competitive over here, but totally non-competitive over here. So we just could not get to where the governor wanted us to get to. And there wasn't the political ability to bring everybody to the middle once that huge package was put on the table. So 2 years ago, it was pretty clear we just weren't going to get done just because of the sheer magnitude of what was proposed. So then we came into a much more moderate role where we said we could still be much more competitive if we just reduced the rates and eliminated the number of brackets. We could be much more competitive. And we thought, again, it was the governor's last year, and he'd been a proponent of this for a long time. So we thought maybe there'd be a legacy opportunity here of his legacy being this final tax proposal. There was $1 billion in the surplus. I mean, the more money than we've ever had. And so now is a really good time to say, let's take some of that and pony it back to get tax rates reduced. Because if there's $1 billion of excess revenue, that means we've got to have $1 billion in excess taxation from both businesses and residences. And we got to somehow give that money back to the citizens and the businesses in the state. The legislature chose instead to fund some activities more aggressively, to do something about property taxes, although I still believe the state is not the place to do property tax reform since they don't have any track record really in causing property taxes to decrease over the years. So they chose a different path, and we just couldn't move it forward. So it was disappointing, but we still got done an awful lot. And again, in normal years that'd be good, but this year we were kind of had high hopes that we'll have to figure out some other year to get those done.
Always kind of fun to talk about some of the issues that have been in the news here in the first quarter. And one of the stories, of course, is about the Chamber's position on innovation in terms of transportation options, the Lyft deal. Talk a little bit about that being emblematic of being progressive as a community. In terms of business.
For those folks who haven't captured it, Lyft and another company called Uber. Now, Uber has not come to Omaha yet, but Lyft is a very similar thing. It's a real innovative approach where they've got an app, and you can download that app. And if you're in a town that has Lyft service, you can go to that app and say, I need a ride from such and such a place to another such and such a place at such and such a time. And there are volunteers in the community who have to go through some rigor of a background check and make sure they have the insurance, and their car has to be a certain level of a certain age and has to be maintained and all those kind of things. And once they're a certified Lyft driver, they get this big pink mustache they put on the front of their car, and they connect up with people who need a ride. So if I needed a ride from here back to the Chamber, I could go into the app and say, I need a ride from Metro Community College back downtown to the Chamber. And the nearest Lyft provider would say, I can be there in 7 minutes. And they give you a picture of who that driver is and the kind of car they're going to be driving, so you have some kind of a safety thing, and they'll give you a ride. And then all the transaction is all done via credit card. 80% of the transaction goes to the Lyft driver, 20% goes to the Lyft corporation. And then there's also an opportunity to make a donation to some charity that you can do while you're doing your transaction. So it's a really kind of a social media-esque kind of service to move people around. that does not include local taxi service or bus service or whatever that might be. So Lyft has proposed to come to Omaha. And the immediate response was from the Public Service Commission, who lays out the regulations for limousine drivers and for taxi companies, that you're not living within our regulations, and as such, you cannot charge for your service until you live up to all the regulations we have in place for taxi cabs and for limos. Well, their response was not only no, you can't, but if you do, we will ticket you, we will impound your car, maybe we'll arrest you. I mean, we're going to get the police involved if you do this in Omaha. Well, there's 60 communities around the country where this is happening already.
60?
60. And there are some, granted, that still haven't figured out how to get Lyft and the communities to work together. Detroit is still fighting with them. So about 5 or 6 other communities are still doing some kind of an argument with Lyft about them serving in their communities. Even Austin, Texas, you know, supposedly the coolest city in the country, didn't allow Lyft to do service during South by Southwest this year. So we're not alone in saying we got to figure this out. We entered the fray when dozens of my members called and said, I use Lyft or Uber when I'm traveling as a really cool alternate way, not only to get around town, but to learn more about the community and to meet more people in those communities. Because you're meeting citizens who probably have some other job in the community and just happen to be doing Lyft part-time. It's a good way to kind of figure out what other people think about their community and what they might do. So we were getting a lot of input from our members that this is the right thing to do. And so we did what the chamber normally does. You know, if we find some conflict between business and government, we try and provide some level of bridge between the two. So we sent a letter to the Public Service Commission and the Insurance Commission to say, look, we got to figure out a way to get to yes here. If 60 other communities in the country can figure this out, surely we can, and the chamber is willing to help. And that letter has spawned an awful lot of interest. I've been on TV and radio, social media blew up that we were supporting Lyft, and that's been a good thing for the organization. Our young professionals have gotten engaged in kind of a social media way to kind of let people know that this is going on. And we're going to have a meeting really soon here with the Public Service Commission to kind of talk about where does this need to be. And in the meantime, we're doing a lot of research to figure out how these other communities figure out how to make this happen without having this big brouhaha occur.
Some might think that this is a little out of character for the chamber to be supportive of something so radical, you know.
Yeah,
but it's on the other hand,
really.
as you explained in your letter. I mean, this is about trying to be innovative and progressive. And
yeah, I mean, it is a progressive. It's another opportunity. So you could liken this to when the internet came out. I know the internet's a lot bigger than Lyft and Uber, but what if communities had said, no, we don't want to go there.
Yeah.
We're not going to provide any kind of fiber optics. We're not going to let you use our internet for this purpose. I mean, our computer lines or our phone lines for this purpose. Eventually they would have realized, geez, that was stupid. I mean, this is something, it's ubiquitous, and we need to be able to accept that. And I think in the end, there's a whole economy out there, almost this sharing economy, this engagement economy that some people have put as much of a $300 or $400 million value to that every year. We saw it with the Berkshire Hathaway meeting this year, where people were coming in and they were staying in people's houses.
You bet.
And there's actually an app for that too, where you can download the app and it'll tell you who locally is willing to put you up at their house. And I mean, so if we can do that, why can't we also figure out how people in your car or my car can provide rides for people who need to get from point A to point B? So it isn't rocket science, but it is the next step. And we shouldn't be surprised that we've got regulations and laws in place that were put in place for kind of what our current environment is, and that those might run afoul of new innovation. But that's okay. We can still figure out how to get the innovation in place.
Yeah. We got to examine our knee-jerk reactions.
yeah, the knee-jerk reactions are not helpful. I mean, it's no different than anybody else saying, not in my backyard, or no, we don't want that type of person living in my neighborhood. I mean, those are reactions that just aren't necessary and aren't helpful, and they really aren't reflective of what Omaha is all about. So we're just trying to make sure that we're able to build bridges where we can to make these things work better.
Something else that was prominent in the news in the first quarter, the continuing drama over the Mecca board. Does the chamber have an opinion on all that's going on in that respect?
You know, we are always concerned when one of the major boards in town has got some kind of of angst being expressed publicly. It happens in every community around the country. There's a county board or a city council or a public board, a planning department, something or another that gets in the news because they've gotten crosswise either amongst themselves or some controversial decision they've had to make. Mecca is an important board here in town. It manages a couple of major facilities that are a major part of our image. They're a major part of the kind of events that we like to see here in Omaha. And so you want to see that board and the government entities that work with that board get along and understand each other. Right now they're in a bit of a state of flux, but I think that has they've dialed it all back. They're talking. I think they're in the right mode for negotiations to deal with how do we make it more transparent but still keep those things competitive. Is the board the right size given the responsibility of the organization? Are the terms of the board members right compared to the responsibility of the organization? And those are all legitimate things that group should look at. We've got a structure where the mayor and the city council appoint members to that group, and so they've got to be involved necessarily in the conversation too. So yeah, we've been involved, but mostly just sort of behind the scenes, just trying to provide help where we can. We don't have the authority to engage in this at all, but to the extent that people say, what do you think about this? We've been ready to offer opinion or even support where we can, because we run a not-for-profit too with our own board and may have come across some similar issues in the past.
Just some hodgepodge here in the last 5 minutes. Not hodgepodge, but I like to go through a few of these things. Anything new on the Intern Omaha program?
Every year we help companies, over the last 3 years, we've helped companies by having a number of interns stay in one location, and then to have those interns also get engaged in social activities here in Omaha, so that if they're given an offer of a job here following that internship, that they actually have gotten engaged in the community and might know more about it and might like it more because they've actually done more than just go from their hotel or their apartment to work and back. We've helped them make friends, we helped them engage. This year we think we'll have more than 250 interns involved in the program. And that'll help companies hopefully get a higher rate of acceptance when they offer positions to these interns after their first or second year internships. It's going well.
Yeah, good. There's a travel survey that you're anxious for members to participate in relative to flight service in Omaha, right?
Yeah, we are continually trying to improve the level of service. We work very closely with the airport authority to try and find how are we doing when it comes to hitting the right locations from our airport. We just added Seattle this year as a nonstop to the West Coast, which was a big deal.
And that's what you're talking about is nonstops,
yeah,
right?
Right. We want nonstops. We got plenty of places you can stop to go somewhere else. We got 200 plus nonstops a day here in Omaha, and the West Coast is probably the one where we still have challenge. Now there is an LA nonstop that's going to be in place this summer. The Seattle nonstop's been in place now for several months. We want companies to kind of tell us, where is it that you want to go? And are we meeting that need? And so we then provide that information to the airport authority, and they use that as the basis for talking to airlines and showing airlines, here's where our companies need to go and even how many people they need to fly there on an annual basis. Cumulatively, that could be enough to convince an airline that, yeah, maybe San Francisco is next on our list or New Orleans is next on our list, whatever that might be.
How would they not know that based on transfer? I mean, you fly to Chicago and go to LA, they've got that information.
Yeah, they have all the information, but like everyone
easier.
else, every community in the country is asking for nonstop flights somewhere. And so the airport authority does a really nice job of being front and center and pitching it on a regular basis where our priority locations are. So you just can't assume that they know the information. You've got to make sure they have all the new information about your community too.
So-called community development
Yeah.
is always something, and you touched on it with some of the industrial sites, et cetera. Is that part of the campaign, and what's the focus there?
Yeah, Prosper Omaha does take on the pieces of community development that we still feel that we can be effective in. When we started the North Omaha Development Project and the South Omaha Development Project and Destination Midtown, we did it as a holistic, complete package. We were going to worry about code enforcement, we were going to worry about transportation, we were going to worry about business development, site development, marketing, everything you could think of. We were going to be involved in helping these neighborhoods and the communities grow. Over time, we have worked with local organizations to help them build capacity so we don't have to take on all of those. And so now the part of community development that has survived is site development and business development. So when it comes to small business development and recruitment of new businesses, we're doing that in East Omaha as well as West Omaha and the rest of the region. And when it comes to site development, all that industrial park development and other smaller site developments is part of the Prosper Omaha agenda. So we're doing that now in two main areas, business development and site development.
So you kind of have redirected your focus.
Yeah, because we've been able to help others kind of take on, so as an example, neighborhood associations are much better at worrying about code enforcement than we are. I mean, we essentially were going through the neighborhood associations to worry about code enforcement anyway. Now, if they need our help in approaching the city or approaching the county, or they have a particular problem, we're there to help them with a public policy initiative. But for the most part, we want somebody else who have that responsibility. They can look at it every day, they can live and breathe it, they can wake up in the morning worrying about that particular issue rather than us doing it.
So our first quarter update on the activities of the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce with David Brown. We've talked about the first quarter. What excites you about the balance of the year?
Oh, I think we've got a lot of work to do to accomplish the goals for Prosper Omaha. We've got some really cool announcements, I think, that are going to be coming down the pike in economic development. The startup station will engage. We're working with this branding stuff is going to come out, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So a lot of the things we touched on are going to come out in the next several months, and it'll keep us busy until then. But we're pretty confident we'll hit the goals that we set. And I gotta top off that Prosper Omaha campaign to get to the 23 million, just to say we've done it.
Sure.
So we've got a lot ahead of us.
Well, 20 of 23 already. So
yeah, that's great, but it's not the goal. You know, the goal is 23. And
but you did that in how much time?
We've raised more money than we've ever raised in the short amount of time, 14 months, than we've ever done it. So we've already set a record of sorts. But we set a goal of 23 million, and I'm committed to get that and more.
You don't stop at 23.
No, we don't stop at 20. So we'll keep going at 23. We'll finish up, hopefully more than 23, with some really good-sized projects in there that'll make a difference.
We'll talk about Hall of Fame. The latest Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame business. Gala was terrific. We do this every year now. We've done it since, I think, 1993. We inducted 6 people into the Hall of Fame this year. 3 folks from, we had some family folks from the Lumpkin family, the father and 2 sons. So Irv and Ron and their father Louie. John Boyer from Fraser Stryker. Paul Jessen from Coley Jessen, and Omar Testi from Election Systems. Just really great people who had great histories and great stories to tell, and we had a nice crowd, and it was a very nice event, so we're really happy about that.
Great. About a minute left. The most public events now from here on out.
Yeah, our next big one probably is the Excellence in Business Awards, where we honor, on May 22nd, where we honor the Women Business of the Year, the Minority Owned Business of the Year, the Corporate Citizen of the Year, and 6 different awards that are really trying to say excellence is important, and we want to honor it every year. Plus, we recognize those companies are having a major milestone of 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, or 150 years in business. So it's a really nice event, too, that we're looking forward to.
Great start to 2014.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, as always, and
My pleasure.
Good luck for the rest of the year.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
David Brown with us from the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for being with us on Metro and More. Of course, our goal is to better acquaint you with the mission, leadership, and reach of the college. I'm Kent Pavelka for Metropolitan Community College.
This has been a MetroVision production produced by Metropolitan Community College.
In response to our growing demand for corporate travel counselors, Travel and Transport partnered with Metropolitan Community College to create a travel academy designed to equip and prepare students for careers in the travel industry. Metropolitan Community College adapted to meet our workforce challenge.
MCC increases student income and business productivity, adding nearly $50 million to the state economy each year. The adaptive option is Metropolitan Community College.